There is a technology out there that has literally saved thousands of fingers. And that is this table saw from a company called SawStop. The technology behind the saw was first invented and patented around the year 2000. And since then, you've only been able to purchase one of these table saws from the SawStop company and nowhere else. Well, there is some huge news out recently, and that may be changing. So stick around and I'll explain to you what's going on. Table saws are one of the most dangerous pieces of woodworking equipment out there, and they are the cause for tens of thousands of accidents per year. Many of these accidents result in the loss of fingers and thumbs and other appendages. It's really gruesome stuff. Well, table saws have always been dangerous. That's nothing new.
This is no ornament, Lucky, and a rip saw is no toy. This guard does you the favor of keeping your hands off that saw. And if you don't die, you're all washed up as far as working anymore.
But that did change way back around the year 2000 when a man named Steve Gass, who was a patent attorney and an amateur woodworker who also happened to have a doctorate in physics, came up with the idea. Well, the way that it works is by running a small electrical current through the table saw blade. And because the human body is conductive, when the skin on your finger, your hand, or your arm comes into contact with a blade, the change in the electrical signal activates a safety brake, which stops the blade in milliseconds, saving your finger. Since then, this tool has saved thousands of appendages. In fact, I'm part of a bunch of woodworking forums and regularly see things like this. Now, it isn't perfect and can sometimes trigger if you're using treated lumber or green lumber, which both have a high water content, which can also conduct electricity. But the $100 that it would cost for a new brake and a new blade is really a small price to pay when compared to thousands of dollars in hospital bills and the potential lifetime loss of your fingers. Another thing to think about here, though, is what I would call safety consciousness. Now, I've talked to my dad about how I would love to have a SawStop if I could afford it, but his perspective is that getting something like that can actually lead to things being more dangerous. Now, it is good to have a healthy fear of a table saw and to always be conscious of where the blade is in comparison to your body. But if you always think that you're safe because of something like this, you'll tend to become more complacent, which can actually make you even more dangerous. The same argument has been made in sports like football. Some people argue that bigger and better helmets and pads actually make people more aggressive and take more risks that they otherwise wouldn't take because of a false sense of safety. But I want to know what you guys think about that. Do you think that this is true? Could having a safety feature like this actually make things more dangerous? Or is it just hands down much safer, end of story? Let me know, leave me a comment. So the technology here is really revolutionary, but it's been around for 20 plus years. And so if it's been around for so long, why hasn't it been more widely adopted? Well, the guys who built the prototype and started the company did try to license the technology to multiple manufacturers in hopes that it would really become standard across the industry. And they really came close to agreements with a number of companies, especially Ryobi. Ultimately, though, due to disagreements with the contract, including the licensing fees that the manufacturers would have to pay to use the technology, the deal fell apart. And they decided to go into business for themselves and began to manufacture SawStop table saws in 2004. Now, in a lot of ways, that decision has come back to bite some of these manufacturers. In fact, in 2006, there was a person who was injured using just a regular old Ryobi table saw and sued Ryobi, saying that if they had been using SawStop's technology, that person would not have been injured. And there have been other similar lawsuits against other companies as well. Well, SawStop owns about 100 patents. But the thing about patents is that they don't last forever. And many of their patents have been expiring since 2021. But their last patents actually don't expire until 2026. So that means that we would still have to wait a few years before the technology is more widely available. That is until now. And this is really the big news I'm talking about. Recently, on February 28th, 2024, SawStop announced that they're going to dedicate a key US patent to the public, meaning that anyone can use their technology. Now, the reason that they're doing that is that the US Consumer Product Safety Commission is proposing rules around table saw safety, which would require SawStop-like safeties be built into table saws for the safety of the public. Now, the Consumer Product Safety Commission has not announced when the proposed rules will take effect, but in the SawStop announcement, they said that the patent would be transferred to the public upon the effective date of the new rules. So whenever that's announced, we'll know when that's actually going to happen. Now, in my view, this is fantastic, and I, for one, really look forward to the day when all table saws are much safer. I think it's also really incredible because things like this rarely happen. Usually patent owners hang on to their patents for as long as humanly possible and even try to make small variations here and there to extend their patents even further. Drug makers in particular are notorious for doing this. So I think that it's pretty great, and really hats off to Festool, who is the current owner of SawStop, for taking this step. Another thing to think about is retrofitting older saws. Now, it probably isn't worth it for me to take my old Delta table saw here and retrofit it, but for a lot of larger, more expensive saws, I'm certain that there's going to be a market for people who are going to go in and install a SawStop-like mechanism. One of the downsides of all this, though, is cost. The SawStop saw is not a cheap tool, and I think that if every table saw going forward is going to be required to have these types of safety measures, then the price for all saws are going to increase. But again, maybe that is a small price to pay for the thousands of appendages that are going to be saved. One last thing to say is that SawStop is not the only game in town. There are other manufacturers who have been working on similar safety features for years that use slightly different technology. SawStop's technology just happens to be the first and the best right now. And with the patents going public, other manufacturers are going to be free to take those designs from SawStop and improve on them. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens and what people come up with in the next 10 years or so. So what do you guys think? Have your digits been saved by a SawStop? Do you think that it's just a bunch of hype and doesn't really make things safer? Be sure to leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. Thanks again for watching. I hope that you enjoyed that video, and if you did, be sure to hit that like button and check out one of these other videos. I'm sure you're going to enjoy that too. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one.